Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you all for going ahead and jumping in the chat and sharing with us where you're from. I'm going to real quick kind of open my chat up so that I can see. We've got daycare provider. Yes, we've got look at me, I'm already going off script. So excited to see that we have some people. And I can't tell who this is. It just says Zoom user, but it says daycare provider Illinois. Yes, I attended the October 12th meeting. So glad to have you back with us. If you wouldn't mind putting your name in the chat, the person who said that. Hey, U46, that's Elgin in the house. I'm a teacher assistant in PFA. Okay, help me with this name. Jacob Fayumi, teacher candidate 2024, Governor State University. Welcome to all teacher candidates. How wonderful that we have teacher candidates with us tonight. One of the things that, and I'm jumping ahead, sorry about that, Emily and Pam, but one of the things that NAEYC talks about in their DAP position paper is that this can't just be in-service work, right? We need pre-service work as well so that we can graduate students, whether it is their bachelor's degree or even their doctorate or master's degree. We want to graduate students who have knowledge of this very important work. So I want to, our teacher candidate, again, if I said your name wrong, feel free to come off Zoom and let me know. But thank you for joining us, teacher candidate from Governor State. And then also, woohoo, on your studies, because it's coming up on finals period, everyone. Go ahead and keep putting it in.
You said it right. My name is Yakub. Thank you.
Yakub, yes, and congratulations. Thank you. PFA teacher community based, wonderful. Hey, Denise, I feel like I've seen your name before. I haven't seen you in a bit, but hey, welcome back. Lorraine, thank you. Kindergarten teacher, dual language. We're going to be talking a little bit about literacy, what this work looks like involving multilingual learners as well. And so excited to have kindergarten teachers. If there's anyone else on here that is from kindergarten as well, love, love, love it. We all know that NAEYC, they are constantly reminding us that early childhood is what? Birth to age 8. It's not just an early childhood education and care initiative. It's not 0 to 3. It really goes all the way up to age 8. Which is so important as we think about developmentally appropriate practices. We want to connect children's learning seamlessly, continuity of care, consistency of practices in a way that is developmentally appropriate for them, all the way up to third grade. Woo, once eight years old, according to when the birthday is, really is third grade. So we want to just keep that in mind. So welcome to all of our beyond early childhood education and care educators who are on with us tonight. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. And welcome back those of you who were here with us on October 12th, and welcome those of you who are with us for the first time. I do want to make sure that I share with you, if this is your first time with us, please know that we have created this series so that it builds on each other. It's kind of like the Harry Potter movies, if you will, or the Toy Story series. You can enjoy each one on its own and then kind of go back and get the rest. So Karen will be able to let you know, maybe put in the chat or in the follow-up email with the extra information that you're going to receive for resources, how you can go back and view that webinar from October 12th, if you like. So welcome back to all of you. This is the Developmentally Appropriate Practices, Maximizing Equitable, High Quality Early Childhood Education and Care series. Really excited that for the first time really in our state, you have these 3 organizations, agencies coming together so that we can present information to a broad audience using one voice with many, many lenses to look at the work. This particular evening, we're talking about guiding principles of child development and learning and the implications that those guiding principles, as we look at them through the lens of the NAEYC Developmentally Appropriate Practice Position Statement and the DEC, Division of Early Childhood, and just to distinguish, that is the National Division of Early Childhood, not the Illinois DHS DEC division. This is the National Division of Early Childhood's recommended practices. So we're going to talk about those guiding principles through the lens of NAEYC as well as DEC, and what are the implications that we have for informing our classroom practices. So we don't want to just look at them. What does that mean for our practices? How will we use it in our practice, whether we are an administrator, a teacher, a classroom assistant? And I want to shout out again all of the classroom assistants, paraprofessionals, related services personnel who joined us today. That is where I started my career. And when I'm just dating myself a little bit, when it was called Title 20, I started out as a classroom assistant. And so we know that that one-on-one, up close and personal care for children often comes through the lens of the classroom assistant, who is working and kind of weaving and dodging in and out about the shadows in the classroom. So I'm always so excited to have our classroom assistants and related services personnel joining us on any webinar. That's me. If we were doing the Facebook challenge, we'd say how it started and how it's going. That picture is me pre-pandemic, when I had all that makeup and hair toss and jewelry on, and this is how it's going as we are in an endemic, tridemic, or whatever variant we're in. I'm hatted up and scarfed up because it was certainly snowing a little bit in Chicago today. This is a little bit of information about myself. I'm joined today by my colleagues, my wonderful colleagues, Pam and Emily. You'll see their information a little bit later on. This whole series comes to you, and if you're with us for October 12th, you saw this. We picked this. This is going to be like our ongoing thread that just shows this is what cross-system partnerships look like. It is NAEYC, DEC, Illinois AEYC, Illinois DEC, STARNET, ECPL, who is our host today, and then Early Choices, all of us coming together. And what you do is you see that kind of braiding and weaving of practices. And my thought as we look at this, and even as I said before, when you bring together more than one source, you're able to make sure you capture all of the different avenues that one can look at when you're discussing information. And just want to remind everyone to mute, make sure you mute, and then we will have opportunities. We'll be jumping in the chat to share thoughts, and then we may ask some folks to come off mute and share as well. So Early Choices is one of the agencies that is with us tonight, represented by Pam. She'll tell you a little bit more about herself later. Early Childhood Professional Learning, who is hosting this series of webinars, and that was Karen, who you heard first. The project director for ECPL is Cindy Berry. And then STARNET, which is really across the state, where this is the agency that has a specific lens on supporting students with exceptionalities. And of course, you know, we often think of students with disabilities, but we also want to remember, and we'll see this a little bit later on, DEC reminds us that recommended practices are not necessarily for a student with a documented disability. And if we've been doing this work any amount of time, we certainly know, especially, you know, myself as a consultant, I'm sure Pam can say this, and Emily can attest to this as well. When you are doing any specific work in a district or with a program, I often tell them, this may be something that is specific for a student or a few students you have with an IEP or a 504 plan, but evidence-based practices are evidence-based practices, and they stand the test of time. They're going to work for all of your students, students who are multilingual learners, students who are twice exceptional, right? Those who are students who meet the criteria for gifted and talented, as well as meet the criteria for specialized services under IDEA or the rehabilitation Rehabilitation Act. And then we also want to be so mindful of our children who maybe they don't have that diagnosis just yet, but we know that there's something that's going on that we're trying to zero in on to support those children. So Illinois STARNET, they have regions all across the state. We'll share a graphic with you a little bit later. If you haven't tapped into Illinois STARNET, ECPL, or Early Choices, we're going to make sure you have the information so that you can reach out even beyond these webinars. Everything that we're doing today and throughout this series is grounded in NAEYC's work around developmentally appropriate practices, which they've been doing for years, and DEC's recommended practices. And I'm so excited to say that nationally, these two organizations have worked together and collaborated on many position statements and many practices and initiatives across the years. We're going to go straight through tonight, everyone. So please practice self-care, adult care. Take time for yourself. If you need to walk away, get some tea, use the restroom, drink some water, go check on the kiddos. Please feel free to do that. Keep your volume up and then come on back and join us. We are also practicing grace. You know, as educators, we want to spell check every little thing. Is that period in the right places? That T cross? When we get into the chat, this is what we call brainstorming. Turn off your spell check, your internal spell check, and just go right in and put your information in the chat. This is a safe space and we're showing grace. Karen already talked about the giveaway. It is a hot commodity. I'll tell you, when I got my book in the mail, I still, you should see it. I've got Post-it notes and it's dog-eared here. Those books are hot commodities. And what we are doing, though, just to make sure that we spread the wealth, Karen is keeping track so that we can check and make sure that whomever comes up as being selected to receive the book has not already received one. So woohoo, stay tuned for the email afterwards, letting you know about if you are a selected person. So just starting out with the NAEYC, and DAP is, of course, we're not happy unless we have a million acronyms in education. DAP always stands for Developmentally Appropriate Practice. The fourth edition position statement. In the chat, go ahead and let us know, how much do you know about the fourth edition? A donut hole from Dunkin' Donuts, half a donut from Dunkin' Donuts, or the whole donut? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Where are you at? And remember, this is a safe space. We're all here to grow. So if you want to say, I'm a bite of a donut hole, that's fine too. Go ahead and put that in the chat. I'm looking at all these. Oh, I love that. Who said nothing at all? Pamela, thank you so much for sharing that. We will make sure that you'll leave here with some good contextual knowledge and some great resources to be able to have move forward. I love that one, Sarah. More than a donut hole, but not quite half. I love the liberty that you all are taking. Quite a few of you are saying, I'm a fourth of the way. I'm not a half a donut. I'm more than a donut hole. I'm about half of the way there. Just a bite. Yes. Zoom user, there it is. Just a bite. I love, and just so you all know, those Dunkin' Donuts came from the team from last October that was on with us. We used Starbucks, and somebody put in the chat, hey, I'm a Dunkin' Donuts person. So we promised that we shift for this one. Thank you all so much for sharing. And so, of course, if we asked about the NAEYC a position paper, we have to ask about the DEC recommended practices, and go ahead and let us know when it comes to the DEC recommended practices, are you a donut hole, or as you all have said, hey, I'm a bite, I'm a fourth, I'm a half, I'm a whole, and you could even jump in and say, hey, I'm a full complete dozen. Go ahead and put that in there for the DEC recommended practices. And I will let you know, for those of you that are putting in nothing, typically that's where we fall on the radar of the DEC recommended practices. If you're not a person that's specifically thinking about students with disabilities, you may not have delved into those DEC recommended practices. They came out in 2014. And so that's another reason why, as we team together across these agencies, we want us to not see our work as separate. Work for students with disabilities, work for students who are quote unquote atypical development. We want to weave our practices together so that we can make sure that number one, as educators, we don't need anything extra on our plate. So what's in it for me? Help me see how this work that I'm being called to do, that I need to do, help me see how I can stack plates instead of spin them. So it's not common at all. Hey, Pamela, welcome to ECE. Of course, this is the best place in education to be. So welcome, welcome, welcome to early childhood education. Oh, gosh, we've got so many people on today. I'm loving all of this. Okay, so as we move forward, you've got a reflection tool that you received. If you were with us on October 12th, you saw this. We've changed the inside of it a little bit to reflect today. And we're just going to be asking you all to take some notes as you go along so that you can build your practice and have something to walk away with as you do. Also, we're going to let you know that you do have a handout that says core considerations to inform decision making. We are using this with permission of NAEYC. We certainly want you all to use it in your practices. And so we will make sure that you have the email address, the link, so that if you want to use this broadly in your district or your program, you can reach out to NAEYC and get permission to use it. So you will be referencing these two things as we move forward today. Just a little review from last week. In October, we talked about defining developmentally appropriate practices. It's strength-based, play-based approach to joyful, engaged learning. Joyful learning, we want our youngest learners, if they can develop joy in learning early, then what that does is plant the seed in them that follows them throughout their career and education. It recognizes and supports children as individuals, their families as individuals, and in order to do that, we are looking at children as whole individuals. What do they bring to us culturally, linguistically? And I just love that NAEYC put this in their 4th edition, ability appropriate for each child, specifically and intentionally calling out based off of each child's ability. And that could be advanced ability, average ability, maybe they have a disability. We look at each child where they are, and we use that information for core considerations to inform our decision making. We have the commonality, what's for the good of the whole. We look at the individual child. How do we do what's good for the whole, keeping in mind the individual child? We circle all of this around building classroom community through the context of learning. And classroom community is that place where, just like we said today, we hope to engage all of our children and their families so that they recognize it is a place that has been built for their success. We talked about the DEC recommended practices in October 12th. They were completed in 2014, just before the Every Student Succeeds Act was finalized and written into law, and they have been reviewed. You see, originally from 1991, and even though these practices were completed in 2014, DEC is constantly looking at them and putting out ways through slide decks or through practices such as the one we're doing now to keep them in the forefront of our thinking. And then here is that piece that they actually have in the RDEC, recommended practices introduction, where they remind us, do not think of these practices as solely for children who are found eligible for services under IDEA. Look at all of your children, and if it's going to be good for one child, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be good for all of them. And these are the topics for under the recommended practices. We talked about leadership in October, because leadership is, first of all, we talked about leadership is not just the administrator or your superintendent or the building leader. Leadership is the adult in the classroom, whether that is the teacher, the classroom assistant, whether it is the related services personnel. Leadership is important because leadership sets the tone. As we go through a little bit later on today, we'll circle back to some of these, but these are the 8 topics within the DEC recommended practices.
All right, I guess that is my cue. Thank you, Antoinette. Welcome, everyone. My name's Emily Riley. I'm one of your co-presenters for this evening and very excited to be here talking about DAP with you all. The pictures there, just a little bit about me and my family and kind of what I enjoy. So on the bottom left, that's me and my daughter, Rowan. We like to run. She likes to be my cheerleader, and she actually had her first 1 mile run. So that's a big part of our life. And I think, just with DAP in general and thinking back to those core considerations with individuality and just the importance of getting to know everyone, I thought it was important just to share these brief little slides about the presenters and kind of who we are, because relationships are important. They matter with learning, whether it's peer-to-peer in early childhood or with adult learning as well. Upper left, spent a lot of time in the hospital with my husband. This was actually a first picture of first day of his clinical trial this year in May. So that's a big part of our life and kind of my experiences. And we're big Husky fans. So I live in DeKalb, Illinois, Northern Illinois University. I'm an alumni there, as well as just a community member now, and enjoy partaking in that community and being part of that community. And that is actually kind of where my journey started with DAP. I was very fortunate. Antoinette talked about, this needs to be not just in service, right? I was so fortunate when I was at NIU in my program there. That was when I was first introduced to DAP. So one of my textbooks, I believe it was the dark green cover at that time. After the dark green, it kind of went to that lighter green with some other colors in it. That was the first edition, I think that, the first time I got in DAP. I believe it was probably the second edition at that point. And then after I graduated, I spent 13 years of my career working at NIU in the Child Development Lab. And that's a space where we are supporting practicum students applying theory to research. So that was part of our daily conversation in my role, because we're just always thinking about, what would be best for this particular family, knowing what we know about their family or the child. And so we always leaned on DAP to kind of help us try to provide the best quality environment that we could for each and every child. And I guess I shouldn't, I don't think Vic needs to feel left out. That's my dog on the bottom. Right, of course, you probably figured that out. That's Vic. He's part of the family too, just for the past year. Okay, so let's get into, we're going to be getting into the principles here. There's 9 of them. But first I wanted to show you this visual to kind of give you, kind of show how all the pieces fit together, right? So in October, you spent time with the 3 core considerations if you were with us. There's also the principles, and there's also the guidelines for practice within DAP. We're going to spend our time in principles, but the principles are really, Antoinette talked about evidence-based, right? Evidence-based is important. That's what the principles are. They're the evidence base for guidelines. So that's what the guidelines, we see the research come up in the principles, and then our guidelines basically come out of that, right? We know that this is true with current research. And so then we develop guidelines based upon those principles. So that's kind of how they all fit together. And then you can see that the principles and the guidelines are both situated within the core considerations themselves. So it all kind of links back as well to those 3 core considerations. As NAEYC was revising these the position statement this time, they really saw kind of 3 themes that came out of the analysis of their research. And it was really the importance of culture, context, and relationships. And what I love about the analysis of the research here is that it's all it's interdisciplinary. You know, they're looking at cognitive science, psychology, education, neuroscience. It's not just only looking at education, right? Because we educate the whole child, so we got to know a lot about a lot of different things to be effective in our role, right? So if you happen to be, some of you had a donut size, some of you had a half donut, it's all good wherever you were at. But if you had that full donut, you might be curious to kind of know what's a little bit new. If you're like me, I'm kind of context. I like to know kind of where we've been to help understand where we're at now. So if we look specifically at some of the differences as it relates to principles, we see that they've really just been updated to reflect the new research and incorporate social and cultural context of development. So you'll see that come through in kind of everything around these principles, that consideration of social and cultural development. It's not a separate standalone something that we look at. It's in all of that. And also there are now 9 principles instead of 12. And they were actually reordered a little bit. I had a chance, to go to several of the national conferences and DAP revision kind of updates through a lot of NAEYC's events that they were hosting. So those were just a few of the key points that I remember and that they shared from 2020. So just thought I would share that in case you're curious about what's different, if you were familiar with the previous edition. And before we hop into that first principle, I am curious, in the chat, you can just share with us, what are some of the guiding principles that you use in your work with children? So regardless, you don't have to be familiar with NAEYC's principles. I'm kind of using guiding principles loosely here, like what are the principles as an educator or a professional that you are using? Or you might think about that as, what is it that you know about child growth and development that impacts your classroom practices? So just briefly share in the chat some of the things that you use that really guide your decision-making in the classroom, things that come to mind when you think about that. Okay, Brittany, equitable education. Okay, right. So always thinking about what's going to work for each and every child and the context and what they bring to the learning environment. Oh, Penny, yes, all children can learn. Of the attitude and mindset, respect for children and families, empathy. Okay, right. Most of us, we have some type of core value or principle, right, that we're thinking about as we're supporting young children. Carolyn, strength-based approaches, right? Asset thinking. And if you haven't had time to think about this yet, I know some people are brand new to the field, or maybe this wasn't something that you thought a lot about in your schoolwork. I think by the end of these DAP series, you're going to have probably some that you can really lean on, and hopefully that will help guide you in your classroom practices. So Shannon says individual approaches. Yes, individuality. Remember, that was one whole separate core consideration for DAP. Yeah, relationships, so much of this. So a lot of what people are saying, I can see in my mind. I'm seeing, oh, this goes here with DAP. This is linked back to here with DAP. So even though you might not be using like the exact DAP kind of terminology, I see so much of DAP coming up in these comments. And we do have a lot of information to share today. So I know I didn't get a chance to call out everybody's response there, but please make sure you're scrolling through the chat so you can see what your peers are sharing here. Okay, so principle 1, let's just take a look at this. So basically I want to share, I get to share the first 3 principles with you, and then we'll kind of take a look at these, and I've got a couple resources to share for each of these as well. So the very first one is development and learning are dynamic processes that reflect the complex interplay between a child's biological characteristics and the environment, each shaping the others, as well as future patterns of growth. So when I read this, my brain went right to, you maybe have heard this. Some of you probably heard this before. We are brain builders in early childhood, right? Like this is why, because the environment, interactions, all of that has so much impact on a child's growth, and really how their brain architecture starts to build and the pathways that are laid down. So, you know, when you hear that we're brain builders, it's true. We are brain builders. And so there's so much research to support this. Neuroscience has helped us come a long way in education and understanding this, and helping others to understand this as well and understand the value and importance of early childhood. So when we say interplay of biology and environment, you know, thinking about some of those environmental factors like cultural, social, emotional, physical influences, all those individual and external factors that impact a child and a family. I recall back, okay, so when I was going to school again, I remember in my child development theory class, we kind of had this like debate about nature nurture, right? I don't know, some of you maybe had that experience depending on when you went to school or not, but now it's pretty clear. I mean, there's like their biology, they both, right? Biology is the blueprint, but the interactions really impact how your genes are expressed. And so it's both, but we know that those interactions in the environment are huge and they're very significant. And I think that the Center for Best Practices, I'm sorry, not Center for Best Practices, Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University says this so well. They've pulled together so much of the research here. So I have this brief 2-minute video on experiences build brain architecture. So let's take a look here real quick.
For all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits, the foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
All right. Thank you, Antoinette. I just feel like that was just a nice brief video. Karen's going to go ahead. We'll be sending out a list of all the resources from today. So you'll also get a link to that video. And then I also wanted to let you know, if you want to kind of dive deeper into, you know, experiences and how they impact brain development and types of environments that are supportive and positive, and then those types of environments that can impact children's development negatively, these next 2 videos in their series are also very helpful. So we're not going to watch these today, but you might want to take a look at those as well. I feel like every person in the field of early childhood should have seen all 3 of these videos. They're just so good as far as understanding principle 1. So I hope you take a look at those at another time. Excuse me. All right. So principle two states all domains of child development, physical, cognitive, social, emotional, and linguistic, which includes bilingual or multilingual development, as well as approaches to learning are important, and that each domain supports and is supported by the others. So here, this is really in early childhood, we often say it's the whole child approach, right? We're supporting the whole child. So I think that this principle really encompasses that. I remember even in my philosophy way back when I was in school, I think whole child was like one of the phrases that I used in my philosophy that I had to write for a class, because that was just something we were learning about it and how important that is. And this principle also helps us, reminds us or helps us to understand that a curriculum, so like curriculum in early childhood, should be a curriculum that really emphasizes there should be opportunity for content learning, but as well as the children's social emotional learning, development of executive function, physical movement, and play. So it's, again, it's not, just we're only doing academic learning or content learning. It's using the domains, content area, and using play to support all of that learning and the development. So everything is interrelated. And so an example there, and I think this visual was really helpful too, again, right? So you see academic development there, but it's not isolated. It's not on a separate, it's not on its own. That's really what I would refer to and kind of consider as that content, right? Your Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards. We have content areas. We have developmental domains like cognitive development, physical health, right? So we see all of this and how it can kind of relate. The important piece is that we're learning this through play. And so what does this mean in our classrooms? Well, Jim Gill is one of my favorite early childhood musicians. And so I think about his music and the way he was so intentional about making it interactive. And so like a lot of his music is like a start and stop, right? He's building in executive function, right? It's not, I mean, the kids are having a blast, they're having fun, they're laughing, having a good time, right? That's great for the mental health. That's one of the pieces you saw there in Whole Child, right? It's joyful, it's fun. So that's social emotional, we're interacting during this experience with a peer and a partner. But again, yeah, as the music speeds up or as it stops and I have to stop and wait for the next cue, that's all that kind of, impulse control and building a lot of that executive function. So I think that, and of course the physical development there, right? The movement, if you're doing all the movement along with it as well. So that example is one that really, I think, highlights and showcases this idea of whole child. And so feel free if you want to share in the chat what you think when you look at some of these pictures and how it relates to principle 2. Again, I'm not going to kind of have a chance to probably see all of the comments coming through here, but I want to give people an opportunity to share your thoughts. So on the left there, you see an example. It says fitness, and a teacher developed this experience for children where they could roll a dice and then they're doing some physical activity there. So they're rolling that dice. So we kind of see we've got math and physical, right? So we've got some interconnectedness there. And then I just have a couple of photos of just some learning centers that would be pretty typical to see in an early childhood classroom. We've got a dramatic play center and then a block area. So excuse me, I'm actually sick today, so I'm like really trying to power through this. But if you hear me coughing and blowing my nose, you'll just have to give me some grace. I'm doing the best I can here. All right. Yeah, Barb sees some variety. When we have all that variety, that gives us an opportunity to work on a lot of different skills, right? So I encourage you to think about that in your own environments. Like take a look at your environment when you're in your classroom again, or if you're someone who's supporting teachers, look what you see, how it's set up and how it supports that interrelatedness of the domains and content area. All right. And if you want to dig a little bit deeper into this principle, we've got some great resources right here in Illinois. So you've got ECPL, they've got their preschool English learners section, and there's a lot of great information there. And there's also an executive function activities in the Center for the Developing Child as well. And we'll have that link for you, but lots of great information about executive function skills and how you can support that. So I want to share that as well. And our third principle is the one that is all about play. So play, play, play. So this is how principle 2, right? So this is how we support principle 2 through the use of play. Joyful learning. It fosters self-regulation, language, cognitive and social competencies. And here's what we see and what I love. Play is essential for all children, right? And birth through age 8, right? I saw we had some kindergarten teachers represented today. So that means our 5 and 6-year-olds as well, right? This is not just pre-K or infant toddler. This is all the way through age 8. And I'm going to argue all the way through adulthood as well. But we're in early childhood, so we're going to focus on that piece. And to show you just how important this play principle is, there's a whole chapter in DAP in the book on DAP. Chapter 6 is all about just play because it is crucial and very important. So it's learning via play. I remember back in the day, there used to be these kind of debates about like, is it play or learning, play versus learning? Well, that's not really a thing. That's kind of a false dichotomy, really. This is learning happens through play. We just know that to be true. Play might look different across cultures, but play is important for all young children. And the DEC recommended practices really help us think about ways to make sure that play is accessible for all children as well, right? So we know play is beneficial for all. We might have to individualize or teach some play skills to make sure that all children have access, and think about the way that we're setting up our environment so that all children have access to playful learning opportunities. And then that visual there just kind of showed you some of the 6 things that are really important as it relates to play. And as I'm wrapping up the first 3 ones, I just wanted to, for those of you who were here in the first session, wanted to make a connection back to the 3 core considerations, and hoping that you can kind of see, because remember the principles and the guidelines are situated within those core considerations. So for principle 1, biology is the blueprint. There's also individual and environmental factors, right? So that's like the commonality piece, right? We know that about biology and how children grow and develop. We also know that those domains are interrelated. Our lessons and activities and experiences should be an emergent curriculum and really help and support that, because we're taking into account children's interest and abilities and being flexible and dynamic with the curriculum that we have. And that there's also these kind of common developmental trends around play, and we want to take into account that individuality core consideration again, right? Motivations, interests, and we want to have that access for all. So my brain works how I like to always make connections. So I just wanted to wrap it up that way for people who that might have been helpful for too. And then I love this quote. I think it links back to principle 3 pretty well. What we learn with joy, we never forget. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Pam.
Thank you, Emily. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pam Rising-Rickner. I'm an inclusion specialist with Early Choices, but you can tell that I've been around for a while. So I've been a teacher in pretty much every setting you could imagine, childcare, school district, parochial, Head Start, and so on. I actually worked for STARNET for a while when it first started. It was not even called STARNET at that time. And came to the State Board of Education, worked there for 26 years, and then retired. And now I'm doing this awesome inclusion work with Early Choices. And so welcome, everybody. I'm really happy to be here today. So just a little bit about me. I live in Salem, Illinois, which is Southern Illinois, and with my husband, Craig. And our dog there is the white one. His name is Murphy. He's a little bit wild and crazy. And then the black dog is actually Maisie, and she's our grand dog. So we spend a lot of time with her, even though she's technically not our dog. And then you'll see at the bottom left, Somebody lives in Florida. Yes, a neighbor. Denise, yes, thank you. So this is my granddaughter, Emma, and she's actually 2.5 right now. She is just delightful, obviously, a little bit biased. She is sitting on a quilt that I made for her. So that's another one of my pastimes, and one of my loves is making quilts, along with spending time with Emma. And that's why we moved down here to Salem, was to be with her and spend more time with her. So it was really a great thing. I also like traveling, and in the bottom center, you will see that done a lot of traveling with my girlfriends. We did a trip to Morocco, and there we are on camels, cruising through the Sahara, and that was a very awesome trip. And then on the right, fortunately, my daughter also likes to travel internationally, so this was our most recent trip that we took to Europe, and 1.5 days, I guess, we spent in, well, actually 4 days, we spent in the Netherlands, 3 days in Amsterdam, and then one on the riverboat over here at in the Netherlands. So anyway, that's what I like to do. And I'm going to be talking about principles 4, 5, and 6. And I guess those really talk about looking at children as individuals, and also within the context of family and community. So we're going to dive into that. Principle 4 states, although general progressions of development and learning can be identified, variations due to cultural context, experiences, and individual differences must also be considered. Variations in children's development and learning are due to multiple factors. We know that. Oh, can you go back, please, Antoinette? I'm sorry, I acted like I was done, but I wasn't. And despite the predictable changes in all domains, the ways that these changes are demonstrated and the meanings attached to them will vary in different cultural and linguistic contexts. And so this reminds me of what Emily was talking about with the brain architecture, is the complexity of children's learning and development is just so amazing. And so the cultural impact of that and is has a huge impact on how children learn. For example, in some cultures, children may be encouraged to satisfy their growing curiosity by moving independently to explore the environment. And in other cultures, children may be socialized to satisfy their curiosity within structured activities created for them by adults. So we just need to be, it's important that we are aware of those cultural and linguistic differences that our children bring to the group. And so all children learn language through their social interactions, but there are important distinctions in the process for monolingual, bilingual, and multilingual children. Rather than assuming that the process typical of monolingual children is the norm against which others ought to be judged, it is important for educators to recognize the differences as variations in strengths rather than deficits, and to support them appropriately. I like the little bit of twist on this with regard to, not using monolingual development as the norm, but also to look at the variations as strength. And the DEC recommended practices talks about practitioners building trusting and respectful partnerships with families through interactions that are sensitive and responsive to cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic diversity. And for our families of children with disabilities who are dual language learners, practitioners can provide the family with information about the benefits of learning in multiple languages for the child's growth and development. Development and learning also occur at varying rates from child to child and at uneven rates according to different areas, across different areas for each child. We know how complex that is. Children's demonstrated abilities and skills are often fluid and may vary from day to day based on individual or contextual factors. In addition, because children are still developing the ability to direct their attention, a distraction in the environment may also result in a child's successfully completing a puzzle one day, but not the next. It's not uncommon for some regression in observed skills to occur before new developments are fully achieved. And that's why I like this comparison of waves of development compared to stages of development. And thank you, Antoinette, you can move on there. Thank you. So the concept of stages does not accurately reflect the way development takes place. It may be more useful to think of waves of development that allow for considerable overlap without rigid boundaries. And these waves consist of spurts of development interwoven with periods of little apparent growth. And I really like that comparison too, because when you think of stages, you think, okay, the child's gone through this stage, now they're in this next stage. Well, we know that that's not really the way it works with our children. Right, it ebbs and flows. Thank you, Laurel, that's perfect. It ebbs and flows like a wave. So I really like that concept that they've put forth in the principles. And it's impacted by the environment and the experiences that our children have had. So now I would like to hear from you and just think about, how do you plan learning experiences that support children who are at different skill levels? Because we know that when we're in our classrooms of whatever the ages might be, whether they're infant toddlers, whether they're preschool age, there can be such a variation of skill and developmental levels in these kids. And so just interested in hearing from a few people about how you plan those learning experiences, thinking about, how is this going to engage and support each child at all the different skill levels that we might have in a classroom. I'm going to go back and look at the chat here. Differentiation of materials to present the skill, yes, using different materials, different ways of presenting, broad concepts with adaptations and modifications. Thank you, Meg, that's exactly right. Open-ended materials, yes, always useful. Scaffolding, some experience that can be leveled within itself. So yes, let them choose what level they feel comfortable at, and a variety of materials available, small group or individualizations. Yes, all great ideas. Again, sorry, we're not going to be able to go through each one of them, but thank you. I really appreciate you guys putting those ideas in the chat for your peers to take a look at. And I think sometimes it helps when we can find out what peers are doing, because yes, somebody said agency. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So anyway, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. So Principle 5, and Principle 5 states that children are active learners from birth, constantly taking in and organizing information to create meaning through their relationships, their environment, and their overall experiences. So we know that children are engaged in the continual process of making meaning to their world. Young children construct knowledge and make meaning through their interactions with adults and peers, through active exploration and play. And we talked a lot about play. Emily talked a lot about play and how important that is, and through their observations of people and things in the world around them. We recognize the importance of our role in providing a rich, play-based learning environment that encourages the development of knowledge and skills across all domains. Educators understand that children's current abilities are largely the result of their experiences, which are opportunities to learn. And I like that sort of definition of experiences too. Every experience is an opportunity to learn. And so what our children come to us with is a result of what opportunities they've had. And sometimes it's important for us to remember that. Children with disabilities have capacity to learn. They need educators who do not label them or isolate them from their peers, and who are prepared to work with them and their families to develop that potential. And in addition to learning language and concepts about the world around them, children learn powerful lessons about social dynamics as they observe the interactions that educators have with them and other children, as well as peer interactions. Before age 5, most young children have rudimentary definitions of their own and others' social identities that can include awareness of and biases regarding gender, race, and ability. So we understand the importance of creating a learning environment that helps children develop social identities which do not privilege one group over another. And we need to be aware of the potential for implicit bias that may prejudice our interactions with children of various social identities. And I put this poster in because I just love it, first of all, because it's so colorful and interesting. But I love the message. Differences should be expected and celebrated. That we just should expect this. We're going to have kids that are all different, and we need to celebrate those differences. And disability is diversity. And this poster comes from a couple of ladies that we love working with, Dr. Julie Costin and Dr. Christy Preddy-Franzak. And in your resources, you will have a link to the website that they use. It's called inclusiveschooling.com. And it's where I go a lot of times for resources and information. And they do a lot of training on inclusion and disability and differences and that kind of thing. It's just interesting, and I wanted to share that resource with you. So here's another opportunity for you to share in the chat. What steps has your program taken, or have you taken, to expect and celebrate differences and to ensure that all children and families feel welcome and embraced? Barb says we're doing an equity audit. Ooh, interesting. Cultural nights of celebration, Penny, calling children and their family members by their names, not Americanized names. Awesome. A couple coming in, dual classrooms and moving to all dual over time. Yes, Meg, thank you. Marissa said, one of my recent students' family was from Korea, so we frequently read books with Korean protagonists, listened to Korean music, ate Korean food, also celebrate Lunar New Year with traditional outfits brought in by the family. I love that family involvement. Always so important to have families come in and share their experiences, and helps us so much understand more about the child and about their own culture and what they come to our programs with. Instructional leadership team has been selective on the books. Yes, very good to have books, posters, materials, dress-up clothes, music, all of those things as a part of your classrooms and your programs. Asking children to share, yes. Bilingual child, so parents have helped with that. Okay, thank you everybody for sharing all of those ideas. So principle six talks about children's motivation to learn is increased when their learning environment fosters their sense of belonging, purpose, and agency. Somebody mentioned agency earlier, and so now we're going to talk about that. Curricula and teaching methods build on each child's assets by connecting their experiences in the school or learning environment to their home and community settings. Again, that theme of children come to us from homes and communities, and it's so important to remember that. Their engagement is fostered through affirmative and respectful environments. I shared this poster with you from Brene, Brene Brown. And I don't know if anybody else is familiar with her, but she has some awesome resources about leadership, especially But in this case, it's about belonging. And I'll let you read that on your own, but just to talk about belonging a little bit. The sense of belonging requires both physical and psychological safety. It's important for children to see people who look like them, to hear and see their home language in the classroom, and have learning experiences that are both culturally and linguistically affirming and responsive. And we can promote a sense of belonging and membership by encouraging children's participation in the group, focusing on their strengths and modeling for all children positive responses and inclusive behaviors toward individual differences. I like the next one too, and I'm not going to read each one of these, but just 7 little blurbs on the benefits of belonging. This is from Diversity Kids. And just, you know, to emphasize how important that is, because children's feelings of safety and security are essential for the development of higher order thinking skills. Fostering a sense of belonging is essentially a brain building activity. I feel like that's our theme today, brain building. So again, just the sense of belonging contributes to that brain building. We can involve children in choosing or creating learning experiences that are meaningful to them, helping them establish and achieve challenging goals and reflecting on their experiences and the learning. The DEC recommended practices talk about educators planning for and providing the level of support, accommodations, and adaptations needed for the child to access, participate, and learn within and across activities and routines. And equally important is encouraging each child's sense of agency. Opportunities for agency, that is, the ability to make and act upon choices about what activities one will engage in and how those activities will proceed, must be widely available for all children. Some children may be denied opportunities to exercise agency because they are mistakenly deemed unable to do so. Challenges can occur when we do not speak the same language or are not able to understand a child's attempts to express solutions or preferences. This can happen frequently with our children with disabilities. Always presume competence. Nonverbal cues and/or technology assistive tools may help. And again, the DEC recommended practices highlight the importance of educators working with families and other adults to acquire or create appropriate assistive technology to promote each child's access to and participation in learning experiences. So the importance of working with families in making sure that all of our kids are included in every experience, routine, and activity in the classroom. And so that's principles 1 through 6. We're going to take a little time to pause and reflect on those principles, jot down your thoughts and/or share them in the chat. And thank you for your participation, everybody. Well, if people want to share in the chat, please go ahead and do that. Otherwise, you can just do it on your own reflection tool. And Antoinette, I'm going to pass it on back to you.
Thanks, Pam. And we certainly have a kind of a running theme, don't we? We talking about, I'm still just on that, that video from Emily, just showing us, you know, and this may seem a little bit weird, but when we were watching that, I thought about planes. And I think most like planes, even air trailways, they have that black box, right? And it's so important because that is the thing that lets us know everything that's happening. And you know, oftentimes we'll say, well, you know, the plane went down. We need to find this black box to find out, like, what were all of the things that's happening. We physically, we see our children, like either they're taller than they were last year, or sometimes, you know, last month, then or not. We can see their physical growth, but that cognitive, all of those things that are happening that we don't see, but are so vitally important to everything that we're doing, we're not sometimes even realizing that as we're doing our work on the outside, you know, all these manipulatives and things that we're talking about, this whole series about developmentally appropriate practices integrated with DEC's recommended practices, all of those things are touching the parts of the children that we don't see, but are so vital for their growth and development, and that whole nature and nurture. We are learning now that one can inherit, we inherit from our environments just as much as we inherit biologically from, you know, genetically, our ancestors, our families. We inherit from the environment as well. And of course, if we remember Rothenbrenner's theory, it is the whole environment, right? Our communities and the exosystem, but also our classroom environments. We may not be able to do anything about the environment or community that some of our children come from, but we can, looking at the developmentally appropriate practices, especially that piece about embracing community. I was just looking at what many of you are writing in there about how we are letting families, right? When children who are this age, our age group, even our kindergarten colleagues, birth to age 8, when those children disengage, it's not like the high school student, you know, where you have the family that say, you know what, I'm bringing them to the school, I'm watching them go in the building, and then they're walking out the back door. When young children are not able to engage, oftentimes that connection is, well, what's happening with the family? How is the school? How are the teachers? How is the program? How are we connecting with the families to let the families know that they are embraced? And if the family feels embraced, then the elevation or the increase of them bringing their children more consistently, being more involved in what it is we're asking them to do, all of that increases. So that running theme, you know, that we've been seeing here is just so important as we kind of move into these last few principles. And this goes into everything that we've saying. No learning is standalone. We talked about, Emily talked about stages of development and that picture of the waves that Pam has, and I'll be using that one too. It's waves of development. And even though, you know, we go back and remember from Child Development 101 or Human Development 101, and it says, you know, language, from birth to age 5 months, children are doing this. And then there's from 5 months to 12 months, children are doing this. When we read it in our textbook, yes, it seems stacked. But even if we go back, some of us have to go back a little further than another. Ooh, that's my hand going up. And we remember those child development, our Child Development 101, there's always overlap. Usually you don't see that from 0 to 3 months this happened, and then 4 to 6 months this happened. It usually says 0 to 3 months, and then 3 months to 8 months, and then 7 months to 12 months. Why? At learning development, it is integrated. And so therefore, since development and domains of development, it is integrated and it is as comes in waves, right? So much our instruction of children. That goes to show how their brain is letting us know learning can't be stacked. We talked about this in October, and we constantly talk about it even now. You know, when children are having there's a reason why ECHRS 3, for those of us that are, thinking about ECHRS 3, or even if you are in a district or a program that uses CLASS, such as in District 299 in Chicago, and then some districts even use both CLASS and ECHRS 3, the importance of children having that uninterrupted, it's uninterrupted by adults, time where they are able to explore their learning environment. Now, of course, we might call this choice time, but the truth is that's exploration time. And I think I saw Laurel coming in here, so borrowing from some of her phrases. Yeah, we call it play, but what is play-based learning? It's exploration, it is inquiry, it is independent learning. And so we want children to be able to, in their choice time, they should be able to have a book and maybe take a book from the library or media center over to the block area, or they may take something from the block area and take it over to the dramatic play area. We want to integrate children's learning across domains and across subject areas, because even as we know from higher grades, children are saying, well, what do I need this for? It's because we're teaching them that math is language arts. Language arts is music. Music is discovery or science, so to speak. We want everything to connect with each other. And as we go through these, we're thinking about those DEC recommended practices about instruction and interaction. Of course, all of the principles from the DEC recommended practices, we talked about leadership earlier on this evening, but I feel like the common thread through this whole core, these 9 principles, is thinking about instruction and interaction. How do we instruct children? How do we prepare for instruction for all of our administrators who are on tonight? Everything we want children to know and be able to do, we must be prepared to teach them. So the truth of that also is everything that educators need to know and be able to do for children, we have to be able to give them the opportunity to build that professional practice. So how are we supporting our staff? Right, and ECHRS 3 is very clear in saying educator is not the teacher in the classroom. It's any adult that is regularly involved with your children. That's who ECHRS 3 says is an educator. So how are we providing time even for our classroom teachers and our classroom paraprofessionals and teachers, interns, if we have student teachers with us, how are we providing time for them to talk about instruction so that it's not on a need to know basis? Only the teacher knows this, or only the children who have disabilities are kind of over there. If I'm walking in a classroom, we shouldn't be able to tell quote unquote the area for the children with disabilities. Everything needs to be integrated. And I would also throw in here parenthetically that children learn in an integrated fashion. That's for us too. As the adults, again, we talked about that spinning plates, trying to manage all of these different parts of the curriculum, and then we're being monitored. And if we're not being monitored, then we're having our teacher evaluation this week. How do we integrate the evidence-based practices that we are called upon to implement? The National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations, if we're working around our children with a social emotional development, challenging behavior, we're integrating that into our curriculum. It's not a standalone thing. We talked about the standards before. And for those of you, even if you think about the Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards, it actually says age 3 through kindergarten enrollment. If we take a step back and look at our Illinois Early Learning Guidelines for birth to age 36 months, right? So you've got that overlap, birth to age 36 months, which is 3 chronologically, and then IELDS is 3 through kindergarten enrollment. So we have all of these tools and resources reminding us that we don't want to stack anything. We want it to be integrated, and we want it to be go across discipline and across domains. Principle 8 is letting us know that we do want to move things beyond the reach of our children. And just remembering what Pam said, assume competence. for every single child, whether it is a child with a disability, whether it is a child who is a multilingual learner. And I'm so glad we talked about the ECPL and the WIDA early years. If you ever have an opportunity to partake of that, one of the first things in the WIDA early years is it just puts right out there, a child in our classroom who speaks more than one language is not a problem to be solved. And I love that. And I've actually taken some poetic license with that and just use that for children who have a disability in our classroom. That is not a problem to be solved. We have children who we've heard a lot on the news lately about students who meet the criteria for immigration status. That is not a problem to be solved. It is something to be embraced, and it is something for us to assume the competency of each child and make sure that as they develop and learn, we teach them in such a way where we make it easy for them to have success. So that's where we start, and then slowly but surely we want them to stretch. We want our children to stretch. We want to move beyond their current level of mastery, and that is for every single child can reach a level of mastery. And if you think about, like if you have a niece or nephew, if you raised your own children, as they were beginning to, they scoot, do that little scoot, and then they get up on all fours and they crawl, and then they get up and they start walking. You'll notice there was always something in their gaze that they were reaching for. That principle 8 is reminding us learning should always have children. Yes, they're in the moment that they are in, but it's that gaze, it's that bridging of what is to come that we want to allow our children to grow. And this is also for, and I just want to throw this out there, our children with advanced ability. So often our children with advanced ability become the classroom helper. Oh, go help Miss Antoinette. Go next door and let Miss Emily know that Miss Antoinette can't find her ruler and needs some rulers. Or you go help John Doe or Jane Doe because we know they have it. No, even our children that are exhibiting where they may be above the curve, how do we stretch them? What do we do to build on their learning practices? So building upon the current mastery of children, it is for children at every level of learning and every age. And then principle 9, I really wanted to kind of move quickly to get here because this is one, in early childhood, we have had some conversations about this, right? Screen time, screen time is the antithesis of developmentally appropriate practice for children. And of course it is. And then we found ourselves in the pandemic where for many, many of our districts and our programs, children were doing what? Laptops. The very thing that we've spent so much time saying, you know what, screen time, and there's studies on it. I mean, and not just for early childhood education and care, all the way up, way past birth to age 8, even into middle school and even adults. What are they telling us at night? Don't be on your don't be on your phone when you're going to bed, because when you that screen time, all of that light, even when you put your phone down, it takes time for your brain to kind of shut that off and tune itself to relax. So we've got a lot of information out there about screen time, but I'm so excited that NAEYC is reminding us, let us not by default confuse screen time with technology. Coding, right? That is being computer literate. Right now in Illinois, the governor's Illinois P20 Council actually has a project-based working group that's talking about computer science and the importance of computer science as we, in America, want our children to be tech savvy. We want them to understand that what coding is. And we need that to also include children who are young learners. So I'm on that committee, and I've been really pushing as we're going to be making recommendations to the General Assembly and the governor we need to be very specific about what does that mean for children who are early learners? What does that mean for early childhood education and care? What does that mean for K, 1, 2, 3? So that we can be responsible. I love that. Used responsibly and intentionally, technology does have a place in supporting children's learning and development. And these pictures that I chose on purpose because for me, the responsible part is the presence of an adult. When the screen or the technology becomes the teacher or becomes the adult caregiver, that's not responsible technology. But as you see here with these pictures, and especially this one that's on my right, of you see the picture of a worm, and it looks like the children, you know, this could be archaeology that they might be exploring. When I looked at this, I thought, okay, there's science. I thought about small or fine motor skills. Looks like that, you know, they've got the magnifying glass there, and they're using the technology to enhance what they're doing. The presence of an adult, and I would dare say this is true even at older grades, but for young children, the presence of an adult is the foundation of being able to use technology in a way that is appropriate and can be supportive for children's learning and development. And of course, we know for children with disabilities, sometimes that technology, that adaptive equipment, they must have it in order for them to be able to have equitable access to their learning environment. And so you're going to have, you know, their classmates that may not have that adaptive equipment being curious. Let's teach them about it, right? We can teach the children about it so that we can create more awareness, as that beautiful pictograph that Pam gave us. You know, disability is diversity. And so again, as I kind of move us on, I'm excited that in this 4th edition of the NAEYC Developmentally Appropriate Practice, they're giving us this opportunity to intentionally talk about technology so that we can differentiate between screen time and then building equitable, responsible practices when it comes to child development that includes technology. So as we move on, go ahead and share one aha in the chat. Just drop something in there. And it's just not from this, you know, this principle 7, 8, or 9, just this whole time today, that aha that you had. And to me, I define aha as that thing where you either said, oh, you know what, I never thought of it in that way. Or, you know what, I've been thinking about this in this way. I feel like I'm on the right track. And number 3 would be like, what's that thing where you're thinking about, yep, I can't wait to talk about this or to share this. Go ahead and put that in the chat. Yes, Denise, waves of development, ebbs and flows. The foundation of responsible technology is the presence of an adult. Penny. Yes, Penny. The child in our classroom is not a problem to be solved, but a person to be embraced. And when you think about the instinct, and all of us have instincts, you know, even as adults, sometimes you might go someplace and you feel like, you know, I don't really feel comfortable here. And no one may have said or done anything to you, but it's just the energy that's in the atmosphere that kind of makes you feel like, I don't know if I'm really comfortable or welcome here. So that, well, I would never tell a child their problem to be solved, but what is my face, you know, my tone, my posture telling children? What is the setup in the classroom telling children? Lots of people talking about those waves of development, tech development versus screen time, variation of strength. Yes. And so you ought to know I was tricking you. Those ahas, guess what they're going to do? Going to lead us right into Emily talking to us a little bit about reflecting.
All right, everyone, we just have a couple minutes here before we wrap up. So we wanted to give you a chance to utilize that reflection tool that we shared with you. So in your reflection tool, you kind of have a space for each principle to really, highlight something that really stood out to you. And then really though, think about that next step of like, why is this important to me? How is it going to impact my practice? What might there be something I can do, tomorrow, next week, or build into my individual professional development plan so I can continue to build on this skill and work towards this goal, right? So maybe you, a lot of you talked about that screen time versus like, tech and that difference there. So how does that impact maybe how you might utilize technology in your program, or how you might have a conversation with a family about the use of screens and technology. So just take a moment. We probably just have like 1 or 2 minutes to do some quiet reflection. And if you would like to, you are welcome to share in the chat. If not, that's okay too, but I will go ahead and just mute for a moment and give you a moment to kind of process and take a minute to jot down something that's important to you and how you might use it.
About 30 more seconds. So we definitely want you all to keep this with you. Those of you that were with us for October 12th, you're kind of developing a little portfolio here. She doesn't know I'm going to do this, but I'm going to call my good friend Laurel here I want Laurel to just very briefly talk about a panel discussion actually that she put together. Was it not this summer, the beginning of last summer, really about how to pull all of this work together, the community, developmentally appropriate practices, DEC recommended practices, and how she kind of took this and really made it a whole community event. And as she's doing that, I'm going to just be letting you all know that you go ahead, Laurel, and just watch the screen as Laurel
Girl, I
talks to
swear.
everyone.
Okay, good to see you, Antoinette. You know, I always love you. Okay, so what we did, it was April of 2021, I believe, and Antoinette was one of our panelists. But we brought together some various people for a panel discussion after we showed No Small Matter to our community. So we invited our entire community. It was an in-person and a hybrid event because we were just coming out of all the COVID panic. But I had Christy Doan from ISBE, Antoinette. We had Sheila Bauer from STARNET. She's retired now, but talking about early childhood and just the whole system embracing early childhood care and education and the importance of starting with the little ones and really making the point to our entire community of the importance of early childhood learning in all settings. And so that really did result in a lot of knowledge for our school board, for our community. It's gotten us 92 locally funded preschool spots for children in our community who wouldn't qualify for our grant funded programs. And so, but it really does start with education. And like, I'm always hard on the early childhood crew because we're always talking to each other and never talking outside of our circle. And it's really when we start reaching out, talking to our local leaders, local community members, all about this, and talking about it all the time, that we start to see a change in the system. So, but no small matter is super film to show, simple. It hits everyone's motivation. They've got clips that resonate with anyone who might be in your audience. And then the other one that I love is that Build Initiative, little 2-minute cartoon that really clearly illustrates how when the system works together, it really has powerful outcomes for our kids. So
Thanks, honey. And you
you're
all see
welcome.
how I did that? Isn't that a wonderful segue into January 24th? Creating a caring, equitable community of learners and engaging in reciprocal partnerships with families. And that's really, here's the description, you see it right in front of you, really building on bringing in our whole community. Who's our community-based programs, our Head Start programs, our faith-based programs. So that was a great segue. Thanks, Laurel. Like I said, she didn't know I was going to ask her to do that, but it was very, it was well attended, and seeing those administrators there, that their eyes were like, oh, at the end, they were saying, oh, okay, we hadn't thought about this when it comes to learning. You know, superintendents and boards, they're very busy doing the work that they're called upon to do. But when they sat in there and saw that film and then heard the panel, it just helped them begin to integrate and not push down practices, but really build up practices. That's kind of it for us. You all were already like a minute over. So on behalf of my colleague Emily and Pam, thank you so much, you all, for joining us.